We've done a lot of forward driving over the last 5 years in our streams, and look, I'm no expert at it, but having grown up around people that four-wheel drive, you sort of pick up things along the way, okay? One of the unwritten rules of four-wheel driving is that you only need something when you leave it at home. The classic example of that is the shovel. So you'll take it for 3 years, never have a headache, and then the one time you don't take it is the time that you need it. And that's just how it goes with Murphy's Law, if you know what I mean. So look, compared to what was around as little as, say, 25 years ago, the stuff that you've got at your disposal now just makes life easy. So in Western Australia, we normally have two types of beaches. You have a yellow beach, which is limestone based, and you have a shell beach, which is the white beach. So basically all the shells and that sort of stuff get washed up onto the shore, okay? Now what I've got here is this is the twin piston maxi track forward drive compressor. When these initially came out about 3 years ago, they were over $500. Now they've come down to about 196, I think I paid for this one, and I think they've gone down in price from that again. Being Chinese made, they have a shelf life, and we got about 18 months out of our last one. So unless you're going to find a compressor that's made in the States or made in Australia, your main option is usually Chinese made. So this comes out through MaxiTrack, okay? I can't even remember the model name or anything like that. So all I know is it's the twin piston four-wheel drive compressor for your tyres, and I burnt the last one out. It didn't make its 2-year warranty, but I thought we had enough life from it. So, you know, we didn't need to really worry about it. Now, the other thing is too, tyre pressure is really important when you're forward driving, okay? So if you're on a beach that's shell-based, usually from the Cape down, right the way through to Albany and that sort of stuff, you need to let your tyre pressure down to 10 to 12 PSI. Otherwise, you won't be able to get in or out properly, okay? And you've got to be careful on a lot of beaches, because with four-wheel drives, a lot of times people will think, oh yeah, you know, I've got a four-wheel drive, I'll be right. And you'll usually end up in more trouble purely because you're in a four-wheel drive than you're in a two-wheel drive. So don't think just because you've got a four-wheel drive, you're indestructible, okay? So what I've got here, right, is this is a professional tyre gauge from a motorbike shop. I think I bought this from KTM in Bunbury. Okay, now there is no conventional tyre gauge, right, that will let your tyres down accurately under about 20 pound. Okay, so I've got little brass attachments where I screw them into my tyres and they get down to about 16. But under that, you need to go to a motorbike shop and you need to buy one of these low pressure tyre gauges, right? So these go from about 10 to 30 pound, okay? They won't go above 30 pound, and they're not cheap. They're about $300, okay? And when you've had a tyre roll off a rim like I have off the four-wheel drive, these are a cheap investment because a tyre's worth a lot more than one of these. So either way, you don't necessarily have to do it, but since I've been using this low tyre gauge, this is a Motion Pro one, right? I've had no issues with my tyre pressure because you can get it right down to 10 or 12 pound and be accurate with it. So with these, right, with these conventional tyre gauges like this, so with these, okay, these are your conventional tyre gauges. Don't trust them under about 20 pound, right? What you need to do, if you have a look at this, see how on the face of that it goes from like 0 to 30 pound, but effectively it's 10 to 30 PSI, right? These are the sort of things that you need, okay, to make sure that you can let your tyre pressure down correctly, and that way maintain those tyre pressures while you're forward driving, okay? Now, the other thing is too, having learnt the hard way after buying a compressor and having one of their hoses split on me, okay? A lot of these compressors are built to a price and not to a standard, right? So these are your standard little compressor hoses that come with your compressor, right? And what you'll find is they normally split either side of the joins, and they split in a line where the hose is joined, okay? Right? So what I've done, okay, is I've removed one more thing for error, okay, and I went and invested in some proper compressor hose, right? And, you know, with that, as you can see, it's a lot thicker, so it'll hold more volume of air in it, and it just makes your life easier. The hardest thing you've got though is trying to get your fittings to match up, right? And I'll show you a little trick with that, okay? So what I did here is I went down to one of the local hydraulic places, right? Now this is an RT air tyre inflator, okay? So that can go to 0 to 150 psi. And this is the same one that you used to see in the old service stations that used to be hanging off the wall. Now, the good thing about this is, right, when you're forward driving, time is quite important as well, right? So see this here? This is just basically your standard, this is your standard fitting that comes out of the compressor with MaxiTrack, okay? And with all due respect, every single one that I've ever had out of these has malfunctioned, and then you've got a really annoying and really lengthy warranty process to go through. So all I've done with that is I'm not even going to bother using this, okay? I've invested in the compressor hose. I've got the tyre gauge here and the tyre inflator. So the most important thing with that is it's going to save our time, okay? And look, to be quite upfront with you, by the time you finish mucking around with these cheap and nasty little things here, right, you can, and then you use this instead, you can do the tyres on 3 or 4 four-wheel drives in the same time that it takes you to do one with this, okay? So what I'm going to do now is, with these, okay, these are your standard fittings, okay? You can get them a lot cheaper than the four-wheel drive stores and also the total tool stores and that sort of stuff from hydraulic places. They carry them, okay? So these work really well. With this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it a little bit about face. I'm going to screw this into the bottom of the tyre inflator. That's not normally how you do it, but the headache that I've got is on the end of this. Normally when you buy these hoses, what they've got, you know, on one end you've got the fitting that goes into the compressor fitting, and then on the other end you've got the male join that goes into the female join. So that's going to screw into the tyre inflator, right? And then that way that just will pop in there, right? Everything's good, and it's one less thing to worry about, okay? With these fittings, a lot of people say to use all the like plumbing fittings and that sort of stuff. I don't do that when it comes to high pressure and that sort of stuff. I like to use thread sealer. With these are quite heavy duty, right? Even though they're heavy duty, you don't want to throw them around like a lot of the heroes do. So these have got a fine thread that goes into the bottom of it like that. So what you do is you try and tighten it by hand to a certain point. About the 3rd or 4th groove down, I just put a little circle of the gel super glue, which is how I've always done it. As I said, I don't have the thread sealer, and we should be right to go. So what you do before you start screwing that in, right? Before you screw that in, get the width right on your spanner. Okay, get that in there. See how we've just done a little band around there. Right, always do a half turn the opposite way. Right, we've got to remember we've got this in here. Great. So now that that's bedding in, awesome. What we'll do is we'll just wrong way, come on. Just sit there and screw that in. We'll form the seal with the threadies, and that should just about be it, I think. Alright, so we can't put that any further. Okay, and basically what we've done now is we've got the fitting done. It's all sealed. Obviously you leave that overnight so that that will set. Okay, and then what we do there, okay, is once that's done, when you're out in the field, okay, that just slots straight into the male fitting on that. And then what happens is here, okay, now you got to remember too, people, never ever throw these on the ground or in sand, because what will happen is sand and dirt will get in here and it won't form a seal. Okay, so what you need to do is always be especially careful of the end of your hoses or anything that's got a fitting on it like that, okay? Because this is what your connection is to your hoses, like we said, right? Like that, okay? And if you start taking chunks out of it, and then you also start filling it with sand, these things are done in virtual, you know, percentages of millimeters, and they're a very important and intricate fitting, so don't let sand or dust or anything get anywhere near these. And also with that, a lot of mistakes that people made is they'll dump that in sand, right, and then they'll plug it into the end and then they'll hit it, and then you've got all this sand going at high speed, blocking up the tyre fitting on the end, as well as blocking on the tyre fitting on the end. Some of it may end up getting inside your tyre, and then when you're belting around flat out, it just acts like sandpaper, and it'll wear the inside of your tyre out and your rims and all that sort of stuff, okay? Now, what we'll do is we'll just plonk this down here out of harm's way, keep that in a nice clean bag, and what we've got now on this side, as I put this aside, right, is with this is the one that comes in on the hose. Ta-da. Right, so that's the one that comes off the compressor. Okay, so that way what you've got is you've got the seal that'll form there so that you can pump up your tyres a lot quicker. Okay, you can't really get much volume into the hose with the other one that I showed you, so I'll just show you that again. So with that, that's about twice the thickness of the hose that comes with the actual four-wheel drive compressor. See the difference? Okay, much higher quality product. Right, that'll hold a lot more volume of air. It'll take longer to fill up initially, but when you're pumping up your four-wheel drive tyres and that sort of stuff, that will be an advantage for you, okay? All right, so yeah, as you can see, right, there's a significance in diameter of the two hoses there. This is just a much better long-term proposition, okay? All right, and then I'll show you another thing too. One mistake that you make, like I did, right, is I made the mistake of thinking that this was all really good quality, right? And you got to remember, when they build it to a price like under $200 for a compressor, which I don't know how they do to this day, the first one I got, I grabbed and I just gently split the wire and that so it could fit on my terminals. But the problem that I had is when I stripped it back, rather than splitting where the join was on here, right, and the easiest way to fix that, once you've got these the right width for your battery terminal, right, just wrap a little bit of electrical tape in there. I'm getting the right angle there, yep. Wrap a little bit of electrical tape in there, a little bit of electrical tape in there, and then around, and that'll stop it splitting further, right? And then, yeah, when I grabbed it and it went a little bit further, what it did is it actually split the lining on one side of here, which was the first time it had happened in about 20 years, but in the old days they made everything a little bit tougher, if you know where I'm coming from. I mean, if you want to get really like pedantic too, you can change the battery like grabbers as well, but I mean, depends how far you want to go with it, you know. But as long as you sort of keep an eye on it and you don't give it too much of a hard time, you got to remember too that with these, you know, that's very thin copper as well, right? You don't want to get dirt and all sorts of stuff on these as well. Okay, four-wheel drive compressor. Okay, when you first get them, unless you leave them out in the heat, it takes them a while to become pliable. And the best thing to do is just go down to Bunnings, right, and just buy yourself a little rubbish bin with a lid on it. I think about a 40-litre one would be able to take these. And the good thing about that is, right, is when you buy the lid or the rubbish bin with the lid on it that seals, you can't get any junk going into your fittings on the end of your hose. And basically, you know, when you've got stuff bouncing around in a four-wheel drive, the stuff that you can't see, okay, is the stuff that'll cause the damage. And then what you do is, like I said, keep that clean, right? You don't need to use WD-40 or inox or anything on these, right? You just got to keep them dry and clean so that they can, you know, form a seal. I mean, one thing that a lot of people do too, whoops, is they'll just sit there like that, right? And then what they'll do is they'll just chuck them in the four-wheel drive or in the little bucket like that, and then what'll happen is that'll stop any dirt and any junk getting into the ends. And then obviously when you want to use it, you just unclip it, right, use it and do what you have to do, and then you just put it back on there. But bit of friendly advice, before you do that, wait till these cool down, because these can get quite hot when you're pumping air through them. Okay, sometimes they can get that hot you can't touch them, right? So just leave them to cool down before you join them again. And then if they're hot, you don't really want to put them in a bin that's made out of plastic with a lid. Okay, all right, so that's just a little tip, because I've seen that sort of happen, especially if you've got them in the back of a four-wheel drive and that sort of stuff. Okay, four-wheel drives and cars are easiest to kill yourself with than a gun, because not everybody's got a gun, but usually everybody's driving a car or four-wheel drive or whatever, right? And unfortunately, with four-wheel drives, you know, the mentality of some people is to just forego safety and just belt around as fast as you can, okay? Trying to, you know, show everyone how much of a hero you are. When I do my four-wheel driving, I'm always in low range, and I try and get around in second low or in third low. I don't like using high range because it really hammers your clutch over a given period of time. So always be wary of other people when you're on the four-wheel drive tracks and that sort of stuff. The other thing is too, you've got to listen to your revs, okay? So whenever I'm four-wheel driving, I don't have the radio blaring. I don't like people talking rubbish while I'm driving as well. So learn to listen to your motor and listen to what it does. And a lot of times I can tell if I've gotten a wrong gear change purely by the pitch of the motor. if you know what I mean, because, you know, second low sounds a lot different to third low and a lot different to fourth low. Excuse me. And obviously when you're in low range, what'll happen is your speed will determine what gear you're in as well. Okay, so little things like that. Now the tyre gauge here, okay, that was about $160. The tyre fitting was about another $15. Okay, this I picked up at the Mile Up General Store. It was just sitting on the shelf, so I went, yeah, I'll have that. Right, and we had to do another $15 fitting in there. So basically, for another $250, what I've got is I've got a proper heavy-duty tyre inflator. I've got a much better hose than the one that this came with, okay? And unlike the last one, I'm actually keeping my receipt for this one. So this is going to be our new compressor that we're going to be using when we do our forward driving streams. All right, thank you very, very much. Keep being awesome.